Field of Bears is a YouTuber, he's a bear, and he made a mug like his. He is a classy dude with bow tie, mustache, and retro glasses. Oh, he is special, special. Field of Bears is special. He does things in his own unique way. Oh, he is special, special. Field of Bears is special. He does things in his own unique way. You had better not call that guy gay. Good morning, Bears. How's everybody doing today? Good to see everybody here. Always glad to be with you every single morning of your weekdays. That is what we do here at the Big Drum Bear Show. Thanks for joining us once again. And another little shout out to our good friend Field of Bears, as I'm always glad to do. Always love seeing bears supported and other great things that can happen for them. Want to see plenty of great mug sales for the Field of Bears. Good show we had last night. Worthwhile things to consider, if anybody didn't catch that. So let's see who we got in here. I got a bunch of folks. I'll roll call it a little bit today. Hopefully the stream is behaving itself this morning, and we've got consistent movement of stream, as it were. Let's see. We've got Andrew. You were first up in here. Good job, by the way. Oh, you had to leave. I'm sorry, man. Yeah, let's start a little later. Well, even if it hadn't, you had to leave pretty much right when I was planning to start. Honky's up in here. Mike Bison Bear. Also good to see you, brother. And let's see here. Who else we got? We got Liberty Snake, Inspector, more Mike Bison. Let's see here. Hey, Goose Bear. That's good to have you in here. Monkey Wrench Bear. Monkey Wrench Bear. Is that Jeremy? Jeremy, are you Monkey Wrench Bear? If so, that's hilarious. I was wondering about that. Yeah, topic of the day. You'll like it. You'll like it, brother. Glampin' Bear, Sovereign Bear, kick you. All you wonderful folks in here. Until 10:30. Well, and are you on the East Coast, kick you? I forget. I never remember that properly. Yeah, I knew it was you, Jer. I knew that was you. I recognized the little icon. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kikia. That's very kind. Yeah, I'm not going to be going super long today. I'm probably going to stop by about 9:45 or 9:50. So once again, at that Central Time, feel free to tell me, hey, go ahead and stop there, brother. I think you can see the cycles under my eyes a bit today. I'm going to adjust my lights just a hair so it's not right in my face. It's a little less. Oh. Ooh. So, one of the things that we learn as dog owners. Okay, Recon, you're in Massachusetts. That's right. Excuse my eyes. One of the things we learn as dog owners, especially owners of the wonderful Chunk, one of those things is that Chunk takes up any and all bed space there ever could be. He manages to make sleeping in a bed with him one of the most unpleasant practices you could engage in. So, largely, it's not something we try to do often. We rotate the dogs once a night, and then we only sleep with Chunk a third of the time. But I went ahead and had Chunk in there last night, and yeah, he was managing to take up decent portions of the bed and wake me up several times throughout the night. I love the dog, but he's a funny dude. He's a gas and a half. So I posted this. Hang on a second. Well, I'm going to get to it. Let's see here. I shared something in the Hangouts the other day that I would very much like to share with you here. And I didn't think of it until now, which is kind of frustrating. But I'm going to try it anywho. I wonder how I do that. Save to files? Yeah, save to files. It's on my phone, and I'm trying to put it on the computer. So I'm going to put it in my cloud drive. Yeah, add it to that. And then I can get it right away. So this is actually pretty funny. It should be there now. I'm going to open it up. And then we're going to get to today's topic. Jeremy, I think you're going to be a fan, because Jeremy and I kind of went through some of these things together that I was learning about when we were deployed. He and I were digging into some of this material at the same time, and it made it more worth our while. It's always more fun when you do things with somebody else, when you have somebody else to discuss stuff with and work through it with. So let's see here. I have to think. How do I iCloud? There we go. I'm trying to remember how to get into my iCloud drive. Never can usually remember that. Oh, shoot. Somebody's messaging me. Who's messaging me? Come on. Oh, it's you. You also had a dog problem, eh? Dog's taking up too much pillows. Jeremy's a bit of a crack up. I don't know whether or not that'll work. So, hang on a second. Okay, so I love tech. It's always working in my favor. Not. But, so a thought occurred to me. Somebody said it the other day. I want to say it was Best Answers. It might have been somebody else that said to me that I should do the Field of Bears song in Jordan Peterson voice. And I thought, that might be genius. I just noticed it this morning as I'm going back through some of that material and trying to set up the Field of Bears song for today with some of the images of his stuff, trying to make it a little more intricate. And yeah, I might have to do that. All right, you're highlighted already? Okay, so I want to download you to the computer. Yes, desktop. Save it. People are waiting. You know, you could try to be with the program here. Oh, it's leave Big Bear alone. Who's not leaving Big Bear alone? I missed it. Oh, you're talking about people who are mean to him? Yeah, it's not right. It's not right. It needs to stop. End WOJCICKI fascism. Get Big Bear streaming. And it will remain until he's given back his live streaming rights on his original channel, because it's kind of ridiculous. Granted, the way he does it now is kind of fun. Oh, the Britney Spears thing. I missed the Britney Spears thing. I didn't see that. Oh, gotcha. That's funny. That's very funny. Yeah. I didn't see anybody doing that, so. Inspector, you're a gas and a half, man. I appreciate it. All right, so we're going to add an image here, and I'm going to share with you the joys of having a Mastiff Rottweiler. It's both insane and it's also hilarious at the same time. And I can't just tell you, I have to show you because it's just that good. So I think it was after I did the stream yesterday, I came upstairs and I came to look in the living room, and what I saw before me was too funny. Some of you already know to what I refer, but for those of you that may not be familiar, I'm just sizing the picture now so it fits. This is what I found. Chunk passed the fudge out on the coffee table. Somehow he figured that was amusing. Or comfortable, I guess is the word I wanted. It was amusing to me, but apparently very comfortable for him. Just to crack up. And then Gerby, you can't see her in this picture, but she's right up here on the couch chilling. And Gita was laying over. She's on that little love seat that's there. I'm waving my mouse over it, forgetting. Oh, that's right. They don't see my mouse. But yeah, she was up on that little love seat in the back, and then over to the far left is where Gita was at, just chilling on the hardwood floor. So it was pretty fun. He's a goof. I love that guy. If you check my Instagram, I posted one last night where I was passing out, and you can see the studio area in the background because it's our bedroom is right in front or behind the camera. It's right over there. But I'm laying in bed, and then Chunk decides to just on my stomach. You know, that's his pillow for the night. That was pretty funny. At least for a few hours it was. But yeah, gotta love the dogs. Speaking of which, I'm gonna be getting out of here when I do again today because I'm gonna walk a few more dogs for the wife. She decided to be smart and rest up in Winnebago with her aunt and her mom last night after they got out of Minnesota and back to Illinois. I encouraged her to not push herself to drive too crazy. I tried doing that going to, what was that place? Nashville just recently. And that was a bit of a mess. You know, I was stopping at rest stops and all this kind of stuff, trying to get back and plenty of time to play for church in the morning on Sunday. And I needed to be there around 7:30 or so. And I made it, but boy, I was dog tired. Massively tired. By the way, until I get my Pinder's Ugly mug, got to deal with this. Speaking of Pinder's Ugly mug, that should be coming out relatively soon. But what also is going to come out relatively soon is the Big Drum Bear t-shirts. Let's see here. I just got, yes, I do wish to remove that. I just got the notice via email that, I just got the notice via email this morning that, let's see, here we go. I'll share it with you because it's just fun to do. Share the internet window. You got to do that. Here we go. I always have like one scene prepared to just share any old thing with you guys that I want to. So transition. Here we go. Yes, if you can't read it, it says, "Hi, Aaron. Thank you for supporting the Don't See Red Love Chunk campaign. We thought you'd like to know that we've shipped your order. To track the progress of your order, click the big green button below." This is to the people that bought one, right? Because I bought one, of course. So you all should be getting emails like this relatively soon, and you can track where your Love Chunky or Kami shirt is at on its way to your home. So feel free to track that out and be excited when you receive it. It should be awesome. I can't wait to wear mine for the show. I think it's going to be a blast. And to have a Pinder's Ugly mug, and eventually to also have a Feel the Bears mug should be a blast. It should be so much fun. I'd like to have like a separate shelf back behind me here where I just have memorabilia of various bears. You know, I could have an Owen section up there somewhere, like get all the Owen specials on DVD and have those lined up, or get mugs from various people or other. What I'd really like to see is a Field of Bears bow tie, right? Like he's got all this other merch in that Redbubble site, the redbubble.com. I'd love to see an actual like red bow tie with the letters F.O.B. across it, right? That would be way cool. Maybe some Gucci Field of Bears shades, or I don't know what brand he wears there, but those are insane glasses. Those glasses are ridiculous. I'm a fan, man. I dig it. He's definitely got his style in order, and I appreciate that. If you don't know about Field of Bears, Stephanie and Jeremy, you got to go check it out. You're good. It's okay. I already started. You're behind, Stephanie. Deal with it. Oh, Stephanie, let's not do that. I'm good without fake members. I'm plenty okay, but I appreciate the offer. I don't know. Oh, people. Gotta love people. Especially those couple. They're something special. At any rate, not as special as Field of Bears. Well, I should say special in a different way. What? You typed it. How can it be shished? All right. We're going to move on here. I have a limited amount of time. So, one of the things I wanted to share with you guys today was, let's see here, a little further talk about what we were talking about yesterday. So, for those of you that tuned in for my afternoon edition of the show yesterday, we talked a little bit about this concept of evolution, right? And I've been raised to understand that that's pretty much the understanding of how we all came to be here through various random processes, whether you believe God started the evolution on this planet or it happened by random chance, or it was done by extraterrestrials that decided to seed life here that are way more advanced beyond us. Oh, thank you, Honky Bear. I'm going to have to check out what you shared there. So probably some music because you enjoy sharing the music, dude. But, yeah. One of those methods, so, it could be other ideas about how we got here, but it seems like either there's one agent, oh, I already saw it. Gotcha. Cool. Well, yeah. Tonky Bear, by the way, is into some really awesome music. I'll just mention that as an aside. This guy finds incredible stuff, some really intense stuff. And, yes, the theory of origins of species. I'll get to that. I'll definitely get to that. There's some holes there that I'd like to talk about. I might touch on that today, but I don't have as many graphics to back it up. I do have a couple graphics that help me illustrate some of the things I wanted to talk about today. Let's see here. Open that. And I'm borrowing these images from Koinonia House. You can get all of these slides if you go on YouTube. Excuse me. And you go to, just look up Chuck Missler, Learn the Bible in 24 Hours. Probably one of the most influential studies I've ever done in terms of a biblical study. Doesn't mean it's all right. It's just very influential. It was very interesting to learn about. Yeah, I would check it out. So one of the things that Missler talked about in, I think it was hour 2 of the Learn the Bible in 24 Hours study. And let's see if I can bring this up. So again, this is not my slide. This is from the Learn the Bible in 24 Hours, hour 2. I just clipped this little section of it. So that I'm giving proper credit where credit's due. Hopefully I'm allowed to use it. It's just words typed on a screen, shouldn't be any sort of violation there that I know about. So these are the various Big Bang models that have been understood over the years. There was a steady state model, that was thought up by Einstein as to how the universe began, but it was discredited over time, and he even admitted that it was his biggest mistake. That comes from his own mouth about that. There was a hesitation model, and I can't get into too much of the technical aspects of this. I encourage you to check for more of it out, but I'm just bringing attention to some of these points that I'm familiar with. There's been various different Big Bang models that they've toyed with over the years. this hesitation model that I guess they figured out didn't work back in the 1960s, an oscillation model, which is a different kind of thing, that it would expand and contract. The universe would have expanded and contracted gradually, over time, getting bigger. And I guess the various laws concerning entropy or randomness in the universe and a lack of mass for this to be carried out. I guess if you do the mathematics behind it, you discover that there needs to be a certain amount of mass in order for that oscillation model to have been the case. And from what they can gather, we don't have it. And according to the first law of thermodynamics, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. I believe that's first law. I could have that wrong. Then there is an inflation model, and again, the big thing behind that, there's been, I guess, various types of the inflation model of the Big Bang. And for them to work, there needs to be, I guess, certain degrees of anti-gravity forces, which haven't been observed conclusively that I'm aware of. I don't know whether that's changed since Mr. last put this out. He did just pass away earlier this year, a few months ago, I think it was, not too long ago. But yeah, he's no longer with us, but for many years he was diligently creating these studies, and he was not a chump. He was a very intelligent guy, understood a lot of these different issues pretty in depth, and he knew a lot of people who knew more about it than him. But he wasn't a chintzy, just like casual observer of these things. He was extremely intelligent, understood the depths of various fields of scientific study pretty respectably. His main area was in Chuck Missler. His main area was in information systems. He worked on a number of different companies. Even worked at Ford back in the 70s, I want to think, during the Mustang era, when Lee Iacocca was over there. Lee Iacocca hired him to his board because he wanted a technologies guy with a different perspective to everything. Made it unique, and it definitely improved some of the quality at Ford for quite a while. Later on, he worked at Western Digital, and was like a turnaround specialist for them. They were in pretty much almost bankruptcy, and he turned them around, made them, got their practices set up in such a way that they became a Fortune 500 company. So did some interesting stuff. High technologies guy. He even worked with companies that built nuclear submarines for our Navy. Was on the board or was CEO of a number of different companies over his time, and that was his thing. That was his deal. But eventually, he got out of that game. He had an upset. He worked for a company that was trying to do counter trade stuff with a company in the former Soviet Union, and there was some different things went on there. But I guess then the Soviet Union collapsed, and the deal just blew up. So he and his wife lost pretty much everything overnight. And I guess they decided to take their life on a completely different track after that. Good friend of his, of Chuck's, a guy named Hal Lindsey, was the author of a book. I can come back now. I don't need to keep on that forever. Was the author of a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. It's a book about end times type stuff. You can feel free to check that one. Interesting cat, Hal Lindsey. They were good friends. And Hal, I guess, had suggested to Chuck, you've been doing this thing as a hobby for many years of doing like Monday night Bible studies at your church, which is no chump church. It was Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, in Costa Mesa, California, under Pastor Chuck Smith, who is a very well-known pastor, very famous for taking his congregation through the entire Bible, verse by verse, book by book. And Chuck had been leading some Bible studies under Chuck's tutelage, Chuck Smith's tutelage. Chuck Missler had been leading some Monday Night Bible studies under Chuck Smith's tutelage for many years. And people had been recording those on tape and distributing them, and he had quite a following. So I guess it was a thought that at that point, perhaps they go full-time with this kind of thing and take it further. And he had a very interesting ministry. This particular study, yes, I'm umming, I hear it, Steve, if you're listening. He had a particularly interesting ministry that I followed for a number of years. His wife as well created a number of very useful books. So I would check out khouse.org if you're interested in learning more. Go look up the Learn the Bible in 24 Hours series on YouTube. Check that out. I think it will be of interest to you. But at any rate, my point in showing those Big Bang models was just to say that they've been going through these different guesses, these different sort of try it on ideas about what could possibly have happened. And that's often how science works. I mean, I'm not holding that against anybody per se, but there's an attempt to work through an explanation of how the universe came about. And more often it's from the perspective that it came about sans any creative agent, you know, and people like Sam Harris would probably be in that camp. They would lean more toward that side of it. Jordan Peterson might as well. I don't know. But at the same time, he kind of says, well, we don't know. And that's the point. There very well could be a creative agent at work here. You know, I don't know, he says. So I don't know. So I'm going to act as if there is. That's rather Kermity. I've got more of the Kermit and less of the Liam Neeson. I don't know. There you go. There, you have to combine Kermit and Liam Neeson, and then you get a bit of the Jordan Peterson. That's all I'm doing. That's all I do when I do mine. But it's kind of fun. Hey, Gimme. Then we can get Miss Piggy in there. Oh, Kermit. So ridiculous. Yeah, Kermit and Jordan Peterson and Miss Piggy somehow end up in a conversation about evolution. It's very interesting. So I've started digging a little more into some of these ideas about another explanation to this stuff, that perhaps some of the theories that surround the idea of evolution might have holes in it, might not be complete. I remember learning a bit more about Charles Darwin when he released his book On the Origin of Species. Now, he had gone on this voyage, Charles Darwin had, this voyage of the HMS Beagle, and it was a ship that was, well, I can't tell you what the purpose of that ship was now. I'm trying to think. I think they were just a cargo vessel of some type, but whatever the purpose, they were sailing, doing their thing, and he joined them and went out to various islands that they went by and performed scientific analyses of different creatures that he encountered out there. Tried to make some good notes about different things that he discovered. You know, there was various types of finches on the Galapagos Islands. Yes. Oh, you know, I'll give the full title of that book. Just hang on, Jeremy. I'm not going to leave that out. Yes. So he's looking at these different observations, and even at different points throughout there, and he's saying, well, there's all these different varieties of finches. You know, I don't know how they could have perhaps come about, but maybe by slow, minor changes over long periods of time. You see, when Darwin was on that ship, he had been heavily influenced by a book by a man named Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was a Scottish barrister or lawyer. He, excuse me, he had written a book called The Principles of Geology, and in that book, it was basically a tirade against religion in a sense. It was more Sam Harris-y in a lot of regards, as I understand it. And the way he viewed things, he wanted to see a separation between, you know, what support he saw biblically of monarchies and what he thought the world should be like. He said, no, we don't need to be under a king. I think that's probably not a good idea in the long run, or at least that's where he was going with a lot of that. And he felt that Bible supported that. So he thought, well, I need to basically demonstrate that the Bible's not worth listening to. It's a bunch of junk. And he came up with a different geological time scale. He suggested the idea of the geologic column. That was one of the first times it had been represented, was in that book. The geologic column being what is understood as the layout of fossils, you know, the different layers of rock that we exist with in our world, and where you can find different fossils from different eras in our history. But there's some issues with that. At the time that Lyell did that had not been observed. And compared to column he came up with and what we actually have, there are some discrepancies. And yet that concept is still heralded as monumental. And in some ways, yeah, it was interesting that he brought that forward. But there are differences. Those layers don't always exactly line up the way that he talked about, or the way that scientists would like them to. Sometimes they're in a bit of a mix or a mess. And fossils that are supposedly supposed to be in a certain layer are not always found just in that layer. It can be variable. So it's possible that there might be another explanation to how the stratification of the various layers in our Earth's crust came to be. Some might suggest a worldwide flood or deluge, right? So, as Jeremy's trying to point out earlier here, Monkey Wrench Bear, the full title of the book that Darwin wrote was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or it had a dual title to it, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That is the full title of the book, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. And in large part, much of what Darwin was purporting was an excuse for racism, for that to continue, that the white man was clearly superior to the black man. In fact, there's a gentleman by the name of Ernst Haeckel, who was a professor at the University of Jena in Germany. And Ernst Haeckel, he had read Darwin's materials about 10 years or so after the fact. One of the things he had read in Origin of Species is that Darwin predicted we will find evidence to support the theory. Like, the evidence wasn't really there. It was just some of the observations so far that Darwin had taken, some of the thoughts about how we got to where we're at. Hey, Kiki, glad to see you. Glad you could come out. Feel free to catch the replay. Yes, Genesis. That's where we're heading there, Kodiak. Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot. Yes, Michael Bay's book is also good. I highly encourage you to check out Darwin's Black Box. Definitely worthwhile. There's a lot of great books, and I'll get into them as we go on. Who in Benson, Illinois is calling me? I don't know, but I'm not going to answer you right now. I'm a little busy. That's supposed to be off. I turned my phone off, and yet still it rings. I don't quite understand that. At any rate, well, I guess I guess I stopped that turning the phone off thing at 9:30, don't I? Well, all right, that's fine. They'll leave me a message though. It's always fun to get life interrupting you when you're trying to do your show. It's fun. So, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to recall. But see, the people take my attention. Hello, Boulder. Glad you can make it. So, continuing on with this thought. So, Ernst Haeckel had read Darwin's book, and Darwin had said, "We will find evidence to support the theory that's going to happen." It's one of the paraphrased quotes from his book. My phone evolved. That's what happened. Thank you. It adapted to the situation and said, "I'm going to make a call come through even when he's live streaming." Take that. Yeah, creationist live streamer or YouTuber. So Haeckel thought, well, maybe we need to further this theory, whether there's evidence or not. And he sort of developed this science called embryology, or got it going a little further. He created drawings of various different embryos of a variety of creatures. And he drew these embryos to look similar to human embryos. He said, well, you know, based upon these drawings, they demonstrate how different organisms, while they're in the womb, seem to look similar to each other. They have a similar appearance at different stages of development. And the theory was further to suggest that while we're in the womb, we go through the various stages of evolutionary development, right? This was suggested through embryology. And as it turns out, he faked all these drawings. They weren't actual drawings of the actual creatures in their embryological stages. They were massively faked to look more similar to human embryos, right? Well, we'd seen human embryos. We'd seen that. So we had knowledge about that. And we hadn't, I guess, done as much work on the animal embryos and such. But he created drawings to look like that. And I guess later on it was determined, it was in 1874, he was convicted of fraud at the University of Jena for putting these drawings forward. And he openly admitted, right, that he did it to help further the theory of evolution, right? He admitted that he admitted the fraud. He admitted that he faked it. 140 years later, you will still find science textbooks in schools throughout this country, different places, that have references to Ernst Haeckel's drawings. They may not say Ernst Haeckel, but they will have some of the similar embryological drawings to show similarity between human embryos and other animal embryos. Like they're still using that concept to promote it. Are there subtleties to this? Are there nuances in some of this? Absolutely. I'm not saying I have all the information, but this is some of the information that I do have on this subject that leads me to be skeptical, right? And I haven't heard or seen any good information to demonstrate to me that this has not been the case, that this hasn't happened. I've heard people say that it hasn't happened, but I've never heard a comprehensive or evidentiary-based explanation to show, no, that never was the case. This has never been what had happened. Or to say, okay, well, this is really what was going on. I mean, yeah, okay, that happened, but we do have evidence that embryology really is a thing. We can prove that, yeah, the human embryo does go through various stages of evolution as it develops in the mother's womb, and there are massive, like, startling similarities beyond just some minor physical appearances between human embryos and other embryos. You would expect perhaps some massive genetic similarities. And it is true that various different organisms do have a similarity of DNA, as much as what they say. Some between certain types of ape or orangutan creatures, we have monkey type creatures. Oh, excuse me, M-word type creatures. I don't want to offend anybody. Supposedly, there are similarities genetically between various species out there, us and other types of animal species. And those similarities go up to as much as 96% similarity in DNA, possibly a little bit more. Let's say 97% in some other cases. 1% difference is not anything to sniff at. 1% difference involves millions upon millions of genetic detail, right? Millions upon you. I wouldn't know what unit to put that into. Millions of coding sequences that are involved in those differences, right? They're not just chintzy little differences, right? So the overall structure of us having hands and feet, having a nose, eyes, and a mouth, having the ability to grow hair or fur in the case of apes, whatever the case may be, having skin, having similar bone structure, right? Obviously, that's a similarity between us and a variety of different creatures. But where there's differences, it's massive. I mean, even if it's a few percentage points difference, that percentage point, those few percentage points difference, makes a ton of difference. It's not something to just sniff at, man. And that was the big point. So when you hear people suggest that, it's worthwhile to ask the question, well, let's talk about that 3% difference or 4%, whatever the case may be. What's involved in that 4%, right? Yes, I would agree, Hunky Bear. Which is how an atom bomb comes to be a cancer cure. Comes to be, but a cancer cure doesn't. Gotcha. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we could crawl down someday about cancer, but I won't do that right now. So these are some questions that I have learning about some of this. And then let's take this another step further, right? As you dig deeper into the writings of Adolf Hitler, right? He will tell you, as you read what he's written about in the past, that he was highly influenced, as were most of the country of Germany, right? Not just him, by what Haeckel had to say and various other proponents of evolution, right? In thinking that one race was superior to another, that the Aryan white race was somehow superior to Slavs and to blacks, to Jews especially, right? To Asians, the Caucasian, Aryan, blue-eyed, blonde-haired male is somehow superior. That all comes out of what they were taught from major proponents of evolution. And that gave them the onus to move forward and say, well, we have to do what we're doing because the way that evolution moves forward is for the weaker species, the lesser evolved species, to die off so the more evolved can ascend and survive, because it is survival of the fittest, right? That concept does hold true. Survival of the fittest does happen. That is certainly the case. Of course, when you have other elements of humanity come into the equation, then it goes beyond that. Human compassion, human desire to preserve things that might not be of apparent value in terms of survival do come forward because we can do more than just behave like unintelligent animals, which is why I don't buy the determinism idea from Harris. Because you see people do all sorts of things that it wouldn't be advantageous for them to do, right? Somehow he's worked it out that perhaps we just figured out that certain behaviors were more advantageous, but we don't tend to do those things all the time. You know, if it were more advantageous to treat the weaker among us with compassion, why don't more people do that? The idea that it's broken out across the board would suggest that there's more at work there than just determinism, Sam. At any rate. So I've been digging more and more. While I was out there, I began to dig into this idea more and more. Wanted to know what other information is out there that can be looked at to determine how old just this Earth is. Let's forget about the universe for a second. Just talk about how old this planet is. And I started learning more and more about really interesting things that nobody had ever talked to me about in school, like the oldest known tree. Now, there's some differences on tree ring dating. I'll definitely give it that. So people have different views on that type of thing. But one of the oldest recorded trees is a bristlecone pine. I think it's in Australia. I believe that's where it was at. I can't tell you the name of the city, but there's supposedly an ancient bristlecone pine that's around 4,400 or 4,500 years old, somewhere in between there, which would put it coming about right around the time of Noah's flood. That whole escapade about 4,400 years ago, roughly. If you follow a biblical time scale, like if you go from Adam and you actually count ages and such, which may not be an end all to knowing how long we've been here, I fully accept that possibility. Who's evolutionary superior? Kodiak bears or grizzlies? Well, whichever one can take your picture, whichever one can operate a camera, I'm leaning toward Kodiak on that. Oh wait, no, that's Kodak. Never mind. Excuse me. That was a terrible joke. It was awful. I think black bears are a little more rough. Philosophy. What did Conky say for the win here? The philosophy of value of life is born out of the starting point, in a sense that is correct in a limited scope. Darkly funny, Kodak. I didn't see what Kodiak said. Kodiak will share food with other animals and decide not to kill them. You guys are killing me. It's so funny. See, the chats make this so much worth my while. So much more worth my while to come in here and just chat with you guys. So what else am I trying to think about to share with you today? There are the deserts. Desertification, right, is a process that goes on across the earth. And certain deserts have a measurable growth rate. Prevailing wind patterns will cause an increase on certain areas of desert throughout the world. They get bigger year after year. This is something that I learned about through some of these different sources. So you can measure desertification over time and take a look at how much deserts have grown. And there aren't any deserts that are much older than, I think you could trace them back. They don't get much older than about 4 grand years old at the best, at the greatest length of time. But somebody could finagle the method by which they determine the growth rate. That's entirely possible. There's a concept called, or not a concept, it's a thing in science. People have found this thing that's done called ice coring, when they take samples of ice from a glacier or something like that further up north, and they dig down. I have this device that can actually just yank a full big huge core. It just drills a circle straight down and creates this long tube of ice, or I shouldn't even say tube because it's not hollow. There's just this long cylinder of ice that they'll cut right out of the ground. And when they do that, they'll be able to see areas of more clear ice and more compacted whitish ice. They'll have several layers of that. And the thought is that those layers are seasons over time, right? And so that they can count the age of certain layers of ice, and it'll add up to being several thousand years older than the biblical estimates, right? Well, it's an assumption that that's summer, winter, when the different types of ice show up there. That can actually happen a lot more rapidly. That can be warm, cold, and you can get 10 of those within a day, right? You can have temperature fluctuations multiple times within a single day in certain regions. So it's not necessarily nailed down to be summer, winter on some of the ice core samples that have been found in colder regions. What are some other ones that really caught my eye? Coalification and fossilization. You used to think that those processes took millions of years to be accomplished. Not if the conditions you have for it are correct, right? If you have proper conditions, pressure, time, and I'm trying to think how that was set. If things have enough water involved and enough pressure and enough time, not time, I'm sorry. Time isn't necessarily a factor because it can vary. It's mostly the pressure and the overwateredness. I'm trying to remember. There have been some instances where people have taken, for the coalification concept, if you put, it's pressure and heat. That's what I'm thinking. Pressure and heat are for coalification. If you take plant matter and you just grind it up and squish it and put it under heavy pressure, and you put it under enough heat for, say, a couple weeks, you can come out with coal. You can create coal from plant matter rather rapidly. It's been done in a laboratory. There's been a scientist named Robert Gentry who has some really interesting stuff on this. He also has some stuff about the layers of the Earth that are worth checking out. I'm just naming a few things today to kind of wet your whistle, to kind of get you interested to check things out and see what you can find out for yourself. But Bob Gentry, that's what I wanted to dig into for a moment because he's a worthwhile character. I want to say he was a professor over in Tennessee, Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee. I might be naming it incorrectly. I'm doing this all from memory, guys. But he came to a conclusion that the Earth had never been a hot molten mass. He did some studies on low-level granites deep into the Earth that had been extracted. And looking at some samples of these, there were some radioactive isotopes in these granites. A radioactive isotope called polonium. And there were a few different ones. Polonium-210, 212, and 218, I want to say. I might have the numbers wrong. I'm just trying to think of what the actual isotope numbers were. And again, I'm doing this from memory, so bear with me on that. But these isotopes had a very, very, very short half-life, right? Their radioactive particles would bleed off of them rather quickly, take a few minutes, right? So short half-life. Yet, in the rock, you could see this halo burnt into the rock from the radioactive particles coming off the individual isotopes of the polonium. These little halos that are left behind. And there are, I guess, a variety of different methods to determine whether or not that's exactly what these halos were from, was polonium being left behind. There's, I guess, Oak Ridge in Tennessee. Rock on. So I was right about that. So his determination through a lot of more research on this was that these basement granites of the Earth never had been in a state of being a hot molten mass, right? the polonium atoms that were inside of the rock had to come into existence simultaneously with the granite. They had to come into existence at the same moment, not that the rock was a hot molten mass for long periods of time and later the polonium got into it. It doesn't work like that. The isotopes couldn't materialize within the rock at a later time without leaving some kind of trail to show that they'd come from a source otherwise embed themselves into the rock. It doesn't work that way. So the fact that these polonium halos were throughout these different samples of granite demonstrated pretty conclusively that the Earth had never been a hot molten mass. The basement granites of the Earth had never been a hot molten mass. So he published this. It was published in a number of major scientific journals. But when the implications of his research really hit home to some of the people that were bosses at his place, he nearly lost his job. He had to fight to make sure he kept it. And I guess because he had tenure, it allowed him to maintain his position there. But he had to fight pretty stringently to make sure he didn't get fired at that point. There was actually an attempt to remove him from his position after purporting these kind of findings. So kind of an interesting thing to dig into a little bit. He's put out some videos that might still be around out there about these ideas, including this idea that coalification could happen very rapidly. And he does an experiment for you. He videotaped it. I'd love to find these. If I do find them, I'll share the links for it either here in the video chat message or like a comment. That's what I'm trying to say. Or I'll put some things in Hangouts or other things like that. But worth checking into. Bob Gentry. Interesting cat. Libration and ocean salinity. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Honky. There's a ton of interesting stuff out there that makes us question how old is our planet actually. So some of these things are, there's controversy surrounding some of them, and I dig into the controversy, try to understand different people's arguments about them. And in telling you all this, I'm openly admitting I don't have all the information. I don't know all the arguments about all these different things I'm bringing up. There might be evidence to say, well, we can prove that that's not the case. Now, when someone says that, I don't take them at face value. I'm like, well, you need to explain how that's the case. How can you prove that this thing is not worth your time? This thing has actually been debunked. So always question, always be asking. Ken Gentry, huh? It might be his son, because I know that he and his son did some of those things together, Honky. That'd be worth checking out. Could be his, I don't remember. But real science is heresy. There's been this is my larger point, guys. There's been an issue with science for a long time. People have had, oh, you know what? It's about that time, isn't it? Hey, Mofo Nature Bear. Hang on a second. Yeah, so I'm not purporting that the Earth is flat, by the way, just so we all know. Got to get Mofo Nature Bear in here. Now nobody can time you out, Mofo Nature Bear. You're good to go. I like calling you Mofo, just so you know. That's what I do. Yeah, I'm giving you guys some things to think about. Hey, David, how you doing, man? You need a scientist. Guys are killing me. All right, so I put some things forward here, and tomorrow I want to get into a little bit more on this topic, maybe one more thing, and get into some other things that are questionable, not just about the foundations of the theory of evolution, but I want to talk more about the implications this has. If some of these things that we consider are in fact not the case, and we need to reevaluate some of it, what implications does that have on our current situations, right? What implications does that have on our current climate and the current discussions we're having about what's acceptable behavior and what isn't? What's acceptable for our country, for culture? It'd be really interesting to dig into that just a little bit. But yeah, I'd like to lay some more ground about why I've gone the directions I have with some of these thoughts on evolution and all of that. But for now, Bears, I do have to head. I got to go walk some dogs. So engage your mind, engage your body, and engage your heart, and seek to serve the ultimate purpose. I'm glad you could join me here today and listen to me yammer on about evolution and creation. You Bears are awesome. Love you guys. Have a great day.